Well, finally, we get to one of my favorite technologies in web development, server-side languages. There are about a dozen server-side languages out there, and one of the most popular and common is called PHP. So why do I love server-side languages so much? Two reasons. Number one, they are dynamic and automated languages. And number two, they let you use variables and include files. So, what are dynamic and automated languages? The easiest example of this was shown in the previous video. Suppose you have a website where you need to change a date every year. For example, if you have a biography and someone has 20 years of experience in a particular field, you don't want to update that page every year with 21 years, 22 years, 23 years, and so forth. So with a language like PHP, you can actually change that and include a snippet of code which does some math and calculates the current year minus a particular year. And that way, the 20 years of experience will automatically update itself every year. You won't need to change the code every January 1st. Another thing you can do in an automated sense is to loop through data. So what does that mean? Well, as an example, I have a website with a bunch of skateboards called CaliforniaGirlsSkateboards.com. Now the block of code which displays the skateboard and all the parameters of that board is something I wrote only one time. Even though there are about a dozen skateboards, I didn't duplicate the code 12 times. I just wrote it once. And there's a feature in PHP that lets me pull information from a database wherein it loops through and replicates that code block for every skateboard entered in the database. So this makes for an incredibly easy to maintain website. If I want to change anything or reconstruct anything, I only have to change the code in one spot. In a future video explaining XML files, I'll go into more details on how those loops work. So, what are variables and include files? Well, you already know about variables in CSS. The classes and the ID tags are all variables. But with PHP, you can write variables that are blocks of HTML content. Now, one of the best examples I can give for this is a phone number, okay? In my career, I've worked on many business websites, and sometimes a business will change the main phone number of their company. They may have that phone number repeated dozens of times on their website. And if you're forced to do a search and replace across the whole site, you may break something on accident, or you might miss the number altogether. So what if you could save that phone number as a variable and just print that variable everywhere the phone number is displayed? That way, if the phone number ever changes, you simply change the variable. One location, one file. Bam, you're done, and nothing breaks. Now, as for include files, they're one of the best things ever in terms of programming. So include files are the same as a variable, but they're with an entire block of code instead of like a single word or sentence. So let's say you have a site with a very complicated hunk of code for the header. Okay, your header contains a logo, navigational element, maybe a little gallery showing various images, and that header needs to appear on every page of your website. So instead of copying and pasting that code on each individual page, you just create an include file. Write your code in the include file and link to the include file on each page. So the advantage to this is obvious. For example, if you need to change that navigation bar, you only alter the include file, and your modification automatically appears across your entire website. That's pretty awesome. All right, so the basics of PHP code is pretty simple once you understand basic HTML and all that sort of thing. So let's take a look at this first page. Now you'll notice that we have 3 links at the top of the page, and we have Jenny's phone number at 867-5309. So, if we view the source code on this page, you'll also notice that it is just plain old HTML, right? There's nothing weird going on. There's nothing too fancy in this, right? But if we look at the original code, this is what it looks like. This is what that page appears like when you're actually programming it. So you'll notice that Jenny's phone number, there's an open PHP tag, which is this question mark PHP, and then there's a close PHP tag. And then there's a command called echo, which just prints things to the page. And there is a variable being called, which is $phone. Okay. The exact same thing happens up here too. There's the page title, and that's echo page title. And you'll notice 2 other things. You'll notice the includes files here. So here's the include of variables, and here's the include of header. Okay. So the first thing that we'll take a look at is header, because that's kind of the easiest one to understand. So here it is. The header PHP file, as you can see, is nothing more than an unordered list of plain old HTML code. It's something that we have seen used before, and that's variables, random number, and web form, which is this text, variables, random number, and web form. And if we come in here in the source code, we can see that written out. But again, if we're going to the original version of the page, it's not there. It doesn't show up. All we see is this reference pointing to this include file. Okay. Now the variables page, that gets a little bit more complicated. So ignore all this other stuff for now. We're going to get that in a later lesson. But right here we can see where our variables are defined. So phone equals 8675309, and the page title equals variables and includes. So if we come over here, we can see here is the page title, variables and includes, and there is the phone number, 8675309. So this is calling the variables file, so it knows where this data is at, and then we're just writing it to the page. So you'll notice that the call to the variables file is right above the head, and if we come in here, there's nothing here. Okay, there's no sign of that include call. All right, it only appears in the code that we're programming. Another cool thing you can do with PHP is generate random numbers. I know that seems weird. Like, why is that cool? Random numbers? Who cares? Well, you may wonder what you can do with that, but the implications are clear in a few seconds. Why would you ever want to generate random numbers for a web page? Because random numbers can allow you to display different information. For example, maybe you want a photograph to change at random anytime a user visits the website. I use a PHP random number generator to print links on the very bottom of every page of the Girls and Grandpa's website. Let me give you an example of how that works. Next thing we'll take a look at is random numbers, okay? Generating a random number with PHP. So what could you use that for? Well, for example, right here, this link will take you to a random music video every time you reload this page. All right, and let's view the source code, and you'll actually be able to see it change. So here we go. We're looking at the source code. Once again, this is plain old HTML. There's nothing too fancy about it. And right down here, we can see the link to the YouTube videos. So you'll notice that this link changes every time I refresh the page. So watch right here. I click refresh, and there the code is changed. Click refresh again. It's changed once more. Click it again, it's changed once more. So let's show you what that actually looks like in function. If I click this link, it's taking me to Bruce Springsteen's Born in the USA. Now if I refresh the page, and hit it again, now it's taking me to Neil Diamond Coming to America. Okay, so how am I doing this? Well, let's show you. So here is that page. Now you can see we're still calling variables. We're still throwing in the header file. Okay, but now the title is different. Now it's numbers page title. And now you see this code down here for reloading the music videos. All right, so let's go look at the variables file. And you'll see numbers page title equals random numbers. So that is what this page is titled now. It's called random numbers. And again, if we view it the source code, we can see random numbers under the title. What about all the other stuff though? So how am I changing this link to these YouTube videos? Well, first thing I did was create this array, okay? And this has 8 different videos, 8 different links in it, okay? And then the next thing I did was create this right here, and this bit of code generates a random number from 1 to 8, all right? So those random numbers then get associated with everything in the array. So that's a little weird, a little confusing, so let's look at the page and it'll make a little bit more sense. So here it says the href, I'm just printing, and print and echo are the same command. You can use either one, doesn't matter. So here I'm saying print random music video. Okay, so I'm calling that variable first. And then in these brackets, random videos. Okay, so let's go back and look at the variables again. So we can see, okay, the variable random videos is the number of 1 to 8. And then the variable random video, or random music video, is one of the YouTube links. Okay? So first, it's calling the link, and second, it's calling the number. So we come back in here again, we go, oh, okay, first it's the link right there. Then it's the number. Okay. Like, yeah, I kind of get it, right? It's, here's the first thing, here's the second thing. Okay. I mean, it's a little weird. It's a little confusing because, of course, all of this is kind of being processed and happening in the background, right? It's like when you look at the source code, it's not like it's numbered 1 through 8. It's just the link, okay? But you have to associate that number here in the brackets so that it knows which one of these 8 that it should be pulling in from the array. So use your imagination. You can do all kinds of really cool stuff with the ability to create random numbers. This is just one small example of the possibilities. Finally, let me show you a simple web form you can create with PHP. Take special note of the folder structure and the file paths, okay? There will be 3 separate pages. The form itself, the page that processes the information, and the thank you or results page. Now, note that PHP gets a lot more complicated than anything we've used before, but again, I tried to keep it as simple as possible. I removed any superfluous code and gave you the bare minimum required to make it function. A proper form will usually check to make sure that fields aren't left blank, that email addresses are legitimate, and so forth. But I didn't want to include any of that kind of functionality because those features would make it more complex than it needs to be. Another great feature of PHP that I haven't shown you yet is filling out a web form. Okay, so for example here we can put in your name, your email address, and you click the submit button and it will send an email and send you to a thank you page. Okay, so let's take a look at the code for that. So this page is very similar to all the others that I have already shown you, so I'm not going to go over all of this PHP code, but down here you'll notice this is all new stuff, right? So we have a form, open and close, and we also have some input fields. We have the action, which tells the page that's going to process the form. So there's a lot of stuff going on here. Okay, so first, there's a text field, and it has a name associated with it, and there's a placeholder, and that placeholder text is what appears on the page. So you can see your name and email address. That's your name, and then email address appears in that one. And then right here is the submit button. So it's pretty simple, and there's not a whole lot to the form itself, but it does get a bit more complicated when we get into this page, the send form email PHP. So let's actually fill out the form. So let's say if you know, my future wife wants to use it. That's, you know, Demi at iloveeric.com is her email address. So when I click submit, you'll see that it says, thank you for testing out the form. Check your email. You should see a confirmation that you sent something. So this will actually send an email, okay? And if we look back here and we look here at the send form, so basically what is happening is you're on this page, okay? This is the page with the form. You click the submit button, it sends you here to the send form email PHP, which is this. And then once it processes all of this code, it sends you to this page, which is just thankyou.php, which if we come back in here and we look at that page, that is this one, where it says thank you for testing out the form. So in between the thank you page and the form page is this one that does all the processing. So we don't actually see anything happen in the browser on this page, right? It just looks like it instantly takes you to the thank you page. But what is actually happening is all of this, which is the code that sends the email. And all the lines here kind of explain what's going on. So this is calling the form because it is a post form. It can either be post or get are the two different terms you can use when you're creating the forms. It's not that important for this demo to explain what those are. Just just know that that's what it's calling right here. So it's post. It's calling the email field, okay, because that's the name of this field. So it's checking to see that there's some content in there, and then if there is, it starts to process everything. So it'll send a copy of an email to the sender. It also sends a blind copy to myself. And here is the subject line that appears. The date is going to get written into the email. And then right here, these lines are telling the PHP page what to compose in the email itself. Okay, so it's going to say thank you for sending. It's going to show the name, the email, and the time the form was submitted. And then these lines of code are all the stuff that's necessary for the email to be processed and to be pushed through. So once the site is actually up and running, this is not going to work. Okay, if you hit the website and you go to this web form, I'm going to turn this off just because I don't want a bunch of weird random emails coming to me. So I'll probably just remove like that line right there from the code, and then it won't actually send emails anymore. So if you try to test this page and it doesn't function, that's why. So that's going to be the only thing that's missing. So that's pretty much it. It's like I said, this does get pretty complicated, and you got to kind of take the time to study this and figure out exactly what's going on and what it's doing. But this is one of the most simplistic ways that you could send this. Sending the time right there, that line isn't necessary. You know, this line is not really necessary, but pretty much everything else has to be there. So that's the most simplistic way to send an email through PHP. But just to prove that it does indeed work, here is a copy of that email that got sent. So there's the text that appears. Thank you for sending a test email. It spits back the name that you typed in and your email address, and it gives the time that that form was submitted. That should give you a good overview of some of the things you can do with PHP code. The nomenclature and syntax of PHP is very similar to ASP, so it was pretty easy for me to learn because I already had 10 years of ASP experience before I touched any PHP code. But I don't expect you to learn it really quickly. There are still potential features in PHP that are beyond my skill set, but that's the whole point of learning these skills. As you advance and grasp more of the capabilities of the code, you can become more innovative and creative and build things of greater worth. And remember, kids, the world owes you nothing until you create things of value.